They say family is everything, but I learned the hard way that sometimes family is the weapon. For years, I worked 2 jobs, drained my savings, and gave up every chance at happiness just to keep them afloat. I thought loyalty meant love. Until the night I collapsed in a hospital bed and no one came. That silence cut deeper than any knife. Later, I uncovered something worse: debts in my name, whispers behind my back, a plan to erase me completely. But they didn't expect this broken woman to rise again, sharper than ever. I grew up believing one lesson so deeply it felt tattooed into my skin. Family comes first. My mother repeated it like a prayer. My father wielded it like a commandment. And I inhaled it as truth. Every birthday candle I blew out, every whispered wish, circled back to the same promise. I would never abandon them, no matter what it cost me. But no one ever told me what that loyalty would strip away, or that the cost would eventually be my own life. When I was 10, my father told me we couldn't afford new shoes, though his closet was lined with leather polished like glass. My mother cried at the kitchen table, bills spread like battlefield maps, and I pressed my tiny hands over hers, promising I'd help one day. I didn't know then that she had her own account tucked away, untouched, saved only for herself. I thought we were fighting poverty together. In reality, I was being trained to carry their weight while they hid their reserves. By high school, I had become their workhorse, babysitting my brother while my sister went out, running errands so my parents could nap. I missed dances, friendships, opportunities that teenagers were supposed to treasure. But every time I questioned it, I was reminded, family sacrifices for each other, Laura. Don't be selfish. They carved that mantra into my conscience so deeply that even as an adult, I couldn't tell where their voices ended and mine began. As I entered adulthood, that blind loyalty calcified into a cage. I worked 2 jobs while sending money home. My sister bought new handbags with my overtime pay. My mother rang me at 2 in the morning, sobbing about medical bills that somehow never materialized. I transferred money half asleep, ashamed for ever hesitating. The shame was the trap. Because what kind of daughter doubts her mother's pain? What kind of sister denies her sibling help? But here's the twist that stung most. We weren't poor anymore. They weren't desperate. My father had investments. My mother had her hidden fund. And my sister had a joint account they never told me about. While I lived paycheck to paycheck, choking on debt and exhaustion, they dined in quiet comfort. They didn't need my sacrifices, they expected them, and I gave them freely, believing I was saving us, when in reality I was just bleeding myself dry. But they never told me the price of loyalty. I had to learn it the cruel way. Looking back, the red flags blazed like fire, and yet I ignored them all. When my mother's voice cracked over the phone at 2 a.m., begging for just a little help, I swallowed my resentment and wired money. When I noticed my sister had created a group chat that somehow excluded me, I brushed it off as a mistake, though I caught the hush in their voices whenever I entered the room. My brother borrowed my credit card for gas, but somehow maxed it out on electronics I never saw. Every betrayal was dressed in family's clothing, and so I forgave it. Have you ever excused something terrible just because it came from someone you loved? That was me, over and over. Each red flag was a flare against the night sky, but I stared at the dark instead, telling myself I was imagining things. If a stranger had done half these things, I would have cut them out of my life without hesitation. But when family betrays you, the rules twist. Loyalty becomes a leash, and you wear it willingly. I remember one night vividly. I had just finished a 14-hour shift at the restaurant and crawled into bed when my phone buzzed. My mother's name glowed on the screen. I hesitated. My body screamed for rest, but answered anyway. She was crying again, saying the electricity would be cut off if I didn't send money immediately. I sat in the dark, half believing, half doubting, until guilt pushed me to open my banking app. The next day, I noticed the lights at her house, glowing warm and steady, her fridge stocked full, her new jewelry sparkling on her wrist. My exhaustion tightened like a fist, but I said nothing. I told myself it was just coincidence. The same silence wrapped around me when my sister flaunted her new vacation while claiming she was too broke to cover her half of our parents' medical expenses. I swallowed my anger, forced a smile, reminded myself she was family. Maybe she deserved it more. Maybe I was being selfish again. That was the lie I repeated until it became scripture. But guilt is a dangerous drug, and I was overdosing. Every warning, every betrayal, every sleepless night was a dose too strong. Yet I kept swallowing it, because to stop would mean admitting my family wasn't what I believed it to be. And that truth was harder to face than any debt. Still, I can see now that I was preparing for collapse. The weight was building, the cracks deepening, the lies coiling tighter. They thought I was blind, but the truth was waiting, sharp as glass under the surface. And when it finally cut through, it would split everything open. I didn't know it then, but the real betrayal hadn't even arrived. The night my body finally gave out was strangely quiet. I had been pushing myself through endless double shifts, running errands for everyone but myself, and drowning in guilt I couldn't name. My chest tightened until it felt like iron was clamped around my ribs. My vision blurred while I stood in the break room at work, and then darkness swallowed me whole. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't in my bed. Fluorescent lights hummed above me, and the antiseptic scent of the hospital seeped into my lungs. A nurse stood nearby, asking questions I could barely process. My head pounded, my lips were dry, and fear settled deep in my stomach. Not just fear of sickness, but fear of who wasn't there. I looked to my left, then to my right. No mother clutching my hand, no sister whispering comfort, no brother pacing nervously in the hallway. The chairs were empty. I lay in that bed for hours, listening to the footsteps of other families rushing in to embrace their loved ones. I listened to laughter in the hall, the sound of a husband bringing flowers, the tears of relief when a mother woke from surgery. But my room was silent. My phone rested on the side table, untouched, no missed calls, no messages. My family knew, they always knew, yet no one came. The absence burned hotter than any illness. It was confirmation that my worth to them was measured only in what I could give, never in who I was. In the silence of that sterile room, a different kind of pain spread through me. It wasn't physical, it was the grief of realizing that everything I had sacrificed had been for people who would leave me alone when I needed them most. The monitors beeped steadily beside me, mocking the quiet truth. I had no one. That night, I fell lower than I ever thought possible, and still, the drop wasn't finished. The next morning, a clerk entered my room with a folder in her hands. She explained politely that my insurance wouldn't cover everything. I took the papers from her, my hands trembling, and scanned the numbers. Then I froze. The bill wasn't just for the hospital stay. There were charges I didn't recognize, procedures, appointments, debts attached to my name. My throat closed as I turned the pages. Someone had used my identity. When I asked for clarification, the clerk explained these accounts had been opened months ago, linked directly to my information. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. My chest ached again, but this time it wasn't the breakdown that sent me spiraling. It was betrayal. My mind scrambled, searching for explanations. A mistake in the system. Fraud from strangers. But the more I questioned, the clearer it became. The accounts were tied to addresses I knew, addresses of my own family. When I was discharged, I dragged myself home, weaker than I had ever been, but too restless to sleep. I pulled out every document I owned, checking bank statements, credit reports, anything I could access. And there it was, loans in my name, credit cards maxed out, signatures forged. At first, I thought it was my brother. He had always been reckless. But the handwriting, the patterns told a different story. The signatures matched my mother's careful strokes. The withdrawals lined up with my sister's vacations. They hadn't just abandoned me in the hospital. They had used me, hollowed out my identity, and dressed themselves in my skin to build their comfort. If that had been all, maybe I could have convinced myself it was desperation. But tucked in the pile of legal papers, I found something else, an early draft of my father's will. My name was there, written clearly, designated for a share of property. But in the official version filed later, my name was gone, replaced, erased. The ink of betrayal burned across the page. It wasn't enough that they stole my money. They planned to erase me from the family legacy altogether. I sat on the floor surrounded by documents, my pulse racing, my breath shallow. Anger rose in waves, then collapsed into despair. For a moment, I felt paralyzed, drowning in the weight of what I had lost. Not just money, not just an inheritance, but trust, the foundation of my life. Have you ever discovered that the people closest to you were the very ones destroying you? Would you keep quiet, swallow it like poison, or would you finally fight? That was the question screaming in my chest. And in that moment, something shifted. My tears dried, my hands steadied, and my thoughts sharpened. I wasn't broken anymore. I was awakening. I thought they had taken everything from me, my health, my money, my future. But in truth, they had handed me something more dangerous, undeniable proof. I thought I had lost it all, but what I had found was the strongest weapon I could ever wield. I stopped being their victim the moment I began, to see the paper trail for what it was, a map leading straight to their deception. My exhaustion gave way to something sharper, focus. The first weapon I reached for wasn't anger, it was technology. Nights became hunts. I sat hunched over my laptop, cross-referencing dates, bank accounts, even family photos. At first, it was little things. Receipts that didn't line up, bills that appeared in my name but never in my mailbox. But the deeper I dug, the more the lies spread like cracks across glass. I hacked into our shared cloud storage, an account my sister thought I'd forgotten existed. Hidden folders, mislabeled albums, files shoved into corners like they could be buried forever. And then I found it, voice memos. My sister's voice filled the headphones, venom disguised as casual chatter. "Laura's our mobile ATM," she said to my mother, laughing. "As long as she feels guilty, she'll keep paying. Don't worry." The word ATM echoed in my skull until it became unbearable. I pulled off the headphones and sobbed, but it wasn't the broken sobbing of before. It was grief turning into clarity. For years, I thought I was loved. Now I had proof I was exploited. My tears didn't come from hopelessness. They came from finally knowing the truth. And truth is stronger than denial. Still shaking, I returned to the cloud and scrolled further. Buried in the photo archive, I stumbled on something worse than money, worse than betrayal. A scanned document, my father's handwriting, the same will I'd once seen with my name included. Only this time the file showed edits, dates changed, signatures forged, and my name crossed out in digital ink. It wasn't just inheritance theft, it was identity murder. I closed my laptop, heart pounding. I had enough evidence to confront them right there, but instinct told me to wait. I needed more than rage. I needed strategy. That's when I reached out to the one person I hadn't considered before, my aunt, my father's sister. She had always been quiet during family gatherings, sitting at the edge of conversations, watching but never speaking. For years, I mistook her silence for disapproval. But desperation made me brave, so I called her. When she picked up, her voice trembled. "Laura, is everything all right?" "No," I said, "and I think you already know that." There was a pause long enough for me to doubt myself. Then she sighed. "Come over, we need to talk." Her living room smelled of old books and lavender, a world away from the suffocating chaos of my own house. I laid out the documents, the bank statements, the recordings. She didn't look surprised. She looked relieved, like a weight she had carried for years was finally being shared. "Your father wanted everything to go to you," she whispered, pulling a yellowed envelope from a drawer. "He told me he didn't trust your mother or sister to take care of you. But after he died, things changed. Documents were altered." I froze as she slid the envelope across the table. Inside was a copy of the original will, with my name written clearly, untouched. My aunt's eyes met mine, brimming with a mixture of sorrow and resolve. "I kept this because I knew someday you would need it. And Laura, you need to be careful. They won't let go of power easily." Her words didn't frighten me. They armed me. Because for the first time, I wasn't alone. I had an ally. Have you ever discovered strength in someone you thought would never stand up for you? The quiet one in the background who suddenly becomes your shield? That was my aunt, my unexpected ally. We sat together late into the night, creating a plan. She offered names of lawyers, people who could help. She reminded me to document everything, to protect myself not only with evidence, but with witnesses. She was meticulous, almost as if she'd been waiting for this moment. And when I left her house, clutching my father's will and the new sense of power it carried, I felt something I hadn't in years. Anticipation. Because revenge wasn't about screaming in their faces. It was about timing, precision, patience. I wasn't just their victim anymore. I was their reckoning. When I had my evidence and my ally, I knew the time for silence was ending. The time for strategy had begun. And the moment of retribution was closer than they could ever imagine. Christmas night was my battlefield. I arrived at my mother's house, carrying no gifts, only a phone in my pocket, loaded with truth. The living room sparkled with tinsel and false cheer, cousins laughing, the smell of roast turkey clinging to the air. My mother smiled wide, but her eyes narrowed when they landed on me. My sister leaned against the fireplace, wine glass in hand, as if she already owned the room. I sat quietly while chatter swirled. Laughter rose, glasses clinked, and lies flowed freely. Then I stood. My hands didn't shake, my voice didn't rise. Instead, I pressed play. From the speaker came my sister's voice, sharp as a blade. "Laura's our mobile ATM. As long as she feels guilty, she'll keep paying." The words sliced through the noise. Conversations faltered, laughter died. My mother's face drained of color. My sister's smirk collapsed. The room fell into silence so heavy it crushed the air. Forks hovered mid-bite. Children froze. Eyes darted between me and the guilty faces now exposed. The sound of their laughter in the recording echoed in the hush, replaying like a curse. I watched shame flicker in their expressions, denial battling panic. I didn't have to raise my voice. The truth was loud enough. When the recording ended, the silence lingered, unbearable. I almost pitied them. Almost. And then, before anyone else could speak, my aunt, the woman who had always kept her distance, stood. Her voice trembled at first, but it carried a strength I had never heard from her. "It's true," she said. "I saw the papers. I knew what they did to their own daughter. Your father wanted her to inherit, and they erased her." The room erupted. Voices clashed. Demands flew. My brother shouted that it was lies, but his eyes betrayed doubt. My mother screamed for everyone to sit down. My sister cursed at my aunt, calling her bitter. But it was too late. The facade was gone. And then came the twist I hadn't prepared for. My sister, her face twisted with fury, spat the words that split the floor beneath me. "She's not even one of us. She's not our blood." The air collapsed into chaos. Gasps rippled through the family, whispers rising like smoke. I stood frozen, the words echoing in my head. Not our blood, not our family. My body shook, not from fear, but from the realization that the betrayal ran deeper than money, deeper than inheritance. They had hidden my very identity. If you discovered that your entire life was built on a lie, would you crumble? Or would you turn that truth into your sharpest weapon? My aunt's hand gripped my shoulder. Her eyes were fierce, steady. "Don't let them use this against you," she whispered. "This truth doesn't destroy you, it frees you." And she was right. The floor didn't collapse. Instead, it lifted. My mother's secret, my sister's venom, it didn't weaken me. It severed the last tie binding me to their control. The room was still in uproar. Accusations, denials, tears. But I felt strangely calm. For the first time, I wasn't begging for their love or their approval. I didn't need their acceptance. Their confession had given me what I needed most: proof, witnesses, liberation. I looked around the room filled with relatives who had once believed I was selfish, dramatic, ungrateful. Now they stared at me with new eyes, not as the family ATM, but as the wronged daughter, the erased heir, the survivor standing tall in the storm of lies. My sister screamed again, but the sound no longer reached me. My mother tried to explain, but her excuses crumbled. I felt the chains snap, one by one, until all that remained was me, free, unbroken, reborn, in front of the very people who thought they had silenced me. The truth did not destroy me, it released me. I walked into the lawyer's office with a box full of evidence, forged documents, bank statements, voice recordings, and my aunt's sworn testimony. For weeks, I had been building this arsenal, and now it was time to strike with precision. My lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman with no patience for excuses, flipped through the files with growing intensity. "This isn't just inheritance theft," she said. "This is fraud, serious fraud. Hearing it framed so bluntly lit a fire in me. It was no longer just about family betrayal. It was about law, crime, and accountability. When the case reached the courtroom, I sat with my aunt behind me, steady and silent, while my mother and sister squirmed under the weight of their own lies. They tried to mask their arrogance with calm smiles, but I recognized the twitch in their eyes, the tremor in their voices. My lawyer laid everything bare: the altered will, the stolen identity, the forged signatures. She played the voice memo aloud, and once again, my sister's words filled the room. Laura's our mobile ATM. This time, the laughter it carried turned against them. The judge's face hardened, and the jury shifted uncomfortably in their seats. But the twist came when the financial analyst brought in by my lawyer testified. The trail of stolen funds led not only to luxury vacations and handbags, but to shell accounts in both my mother's and sister's names. Accounts designed to hide money. The fraud extended far beyond me. It bled into tax evasion, illegal transfers, even deception against the state. What had started as a family feud was now a criminal investigation. For the first time, I saw their masks crack. My sister whispered frantically to her attorney. My mother buried her face in her hands. The courtroom wasn't their stage anymore. It was their reckoning. And in that moment, I let myself breathe. Justice wasn't just an idea whispered in self-help books. It was happening, tangible and undeniable. I could feel it in the air, see it in their faltering expressions. For years, I believed justice wasn't meant for people like me. Now I watched it unfold step by step, deliberate and merciless. The verdict was clear, the forged documents invalidated, my rightful inheritance restored, and charges of fraud pressed against both my mother and sister. The gavel's crack echoed like thunder, shaking the foundations of everything they had built on lies. But just when I thought the fight was finished, my lawyer slid an envelope across the table to me. "This came in as additional evidence," she said. Inside was a letter, yellowed with age, written in my father's unmistakable handwriting. He had addressed it to me, sealed and dated before his death. "My dearest Laura," it read, "if you are reading this, then I fear my intentions for you have been stolen. I wanted you to know I saw your sacrifices, I saw your worth, and I wished to secure your future. Do not let anyone convince you otherwise. This legacy is yours." The tears that welled up this time weren't bitter. They were cleansing. My father's voice, preserved on the page, became the final nail in their coffin and the first balm for my soul. Have you ever felt the undeniable power of truth? Not twisted words, not excuses, but proof so solid, it silences every doubt. That was my justice. Not revenge, not vengeance, but the certainty that I had never been invisible, never unloved. The aftermath spread quickly. Word of the trial reached the community. Neighbors who once praised my mother now crossed the street to avoid her. My sister's friends unfollowed her, whispers shadowing her every move. Invitations dried up. Their empire of manipulation collapsed, not because I screamed, but because the truth spoke louder than lies. And still, as sweet as that victory tasted, it wasn't the end. The court had returned my rights, society had condemned them, but something deeper was happening inside me. Justice wasn't just about watching them fall, it was about reclaiming myself. When I left the courthouse, the winter air felt sharper, fresher. My aunt walked beside me, steady as ever, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel caged, I felt powerful. The truth had set me free. Justice was mine, but my life was just beginning. The day after the verdict, I packed my bags. I didn't just want distance, I needed rebirth. My phone buzzed endlessly. Calls from my mother, messages from my brother, even emails from relatives who suddenly remembered I existed. I blocked them all. One by one, each number disappeared from my screen. Each message silenced before it could seep into me. No contact, no more guilt, no more leash. I moved to a new city, one where my name wasn't tied to whispers or pity, one where I could wake up without dread pressing on my chest. The first morning in my new apartment, sunlight streamed across bare walls, and I breathed deeply. The silence wasn't lonely anymore. It was sanctuary. For the first time, quiet meant peace, not abandonment. I built routines like bricks, morning walks through unfamiliar streets, coffee in cozy shops, long evenings spent reading rather than rescuing. Each small act stitched me back together, thread by thread. Life felt fragile but pure, like glass catching sunlight, and the audience, those who might have followed my journey so far, would exhale here too. This was the breath after the storm, the pause where peace finally spread. But peace doesn't erase the past. One evening, as I carried groceries up the stairs, I froze. At the end of the hallway, leaning against my doorframe, stood my sister. Her eyes burned with desperation, her smile brittle. For a heartbeat, I felt that old tremor in my chest, the instinct to defend, to explain, to collapse beneath her control. Then it passed. I set my bags down calmly. "You shouldn't be here," I said. She tried to plead, to remind me of childhood memories, to spin words of guilt. But I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I simply walked past her, unlocked my door, and closed it behind me. The lock clicked into place like a final gavel. She could no longer reach me. The difference wasn't that she had changed, it was that I had. From then on, my life wasn't about survival, it was about creation. I started a small business, pouring into it the energy I had once wasted on saving others. My health returned, sleep deeper, laughter freer. Shoulders no longer weighed down by invisible chains. Friends became family, chosen with care, built on respect instead of obligation. And slowly, my heart opened to love again, this time healthy, mutual, safe. The transformation was visible. My body grew stronger, my voice steadier, my presence brighter. People noticed, invitations arrived. Not out of pity, but admiration. And when I stood at a community event one spring evening, dressed not in armor but in confidence, I saw it on their faces, recognition that I had risen, not just survived. That was my glow-up, not the curated kind splashed across social media, but the kind forged in fire, sharpened by betrayal, and polished by resilience. And then came the moment I hadn't expected. Across the crowd, my sister appeared. Her eyes widened when she saw me, radiant and untouchable. She froze, then screamed, not in rage, but in a raw, broken sound that carried her defeat. People turned to look at her, but I didn't. I lifted my chin, let the lights wash over me, and smiled. Because I wasn't her victim anymore. I wasn't the family ATM, the erased daughter, the forgotten sister. I was me, whole, powerful, free. And here is where I turn to you. Is this the ending you imagined? Or is it simply the beginning of another chapter, one you must write for yourself? Because every story of betrayal offers two paths, to remain shackled by it or to rise beyond it. I chose the second. As the night wound down, laughter surrounding me, I walked away from the past without a backward glance. My sister's scream echoed behind me, but it no longer pierced me. It was just noise, fading into the distance. I smiled, not as a survivor, but as a woman who had transformed her pain into power, her wounds into wisdom. The story didn't end with what they did to me. It ended with what I became without them. And that was my true victory.